All right, and we're ready in 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. This is Vice Chair Emory Young, and I now call to order the meeting of the Equity Committee for November 13th, 2025. In accordance with Board Policy 8311, the chair of a committee, at their discretion and after consultation with the staff liaison, may convene an in-person committee meeting. Otherwise, all committee meetings will be held electronically. Today's meeting is being held virtually and broadcast through Microsoft Teams. In order to efficiently conduct this meeting, any voting items this afternoon will be done by a roll call vote. Board members will state their name before making and seconding a motion as applicable, as well as when requesting discussion on an agenda item. Ms. Siebel, please call the roll of board members to determine the presence of a quorum of the committee.
Thank you. Ms. Pumphrey?
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Savoy? Ms. Lusky?
Present.
Thank you. Ms. Frempong? Mr. Young?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Siebel, please call the roll of staff members participating in today's meeting.
Dr. Handy?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Birnbaum?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is Maryland Integrated Science Assessment, the MESA follow-up, and for that, I call on Dr. Handy.
Thank you, Mr. Young. So if you recall from our meeting in October, we did have a presentation on MESA from Mr. Mustafer and from Mr. Landon. Near the end of their presentation, they actually had to transition to another event, and there were some outstanding questions from committee members. I do want to say, this is, a mistake made on my part. I thought we had outstanding questions, and my intent was to bring some answers from those questions. Upon further review of the recording, I realized there were actually, I believe, Mr. Young, you and Ms. Frempong had some outstanding questions according to the recording. So the idea was that you all would be able to ask those questions to the presenters. Because of my misunderstanding and my mistake, I did not invite Mr. Mustafer or Mr. Landon back to this evening's meeting. So my recommendation would be that we table this agenda item for our next meeting, and I'll make sure that the two presenters are invited back to answer any questions that remain from the committee at that time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Handy, and sorry that we weren't clear in what we were looking for. All right, so then the next item on the agenda is the National Board Certification Update, and for that, I call on Mr. Birnbaum.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I believe Dr. Handy was going to go through the first two slides, and then I would jump into National Board Certification.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Birnbaum. So just want to set some context for this. If you all recall, Mr. Birnbaum actually started this presentation at our October committee meeting, and he's going to pick up with the presentation after this. These first two slides at that time were presented by Ms. Charlie Green. Just want to give a brief overview before I turn it back over to Mr. Birnbaum. So what we want to set here with these two slides is just showing where we've gone as a school system over really the past, really like 14 years approximately. So we look at, the closing gaps and equitable strategies. That's the focus that we have currently in our school system. And the slide on the left shows the academic decline that we've experienced in BCPS really since around 2011. And if you look at where that graph levels off, that's where we've stopped the decline. And then over the past 2 years, you see that we're actually starting to increase our academic achievement. The way we're doing that is by what you see on the right-hand side of the slide, and that's the fast forward pathway to success for Team BCPS. So it does start in our primary grades, continues on, so at kindergarten, continues on through elementary in grades 3 and 5, onto our middle grades with grade 8, and then ultimately in high school where students graduate from BCPS. With the goal, for students to be ready to thrive in college careers and the community. So if you take a closer look at each of those benchmarks, if you will, along that pathway, you'll see what we're looking for students to demonstrate as far as their academic achievement at each step. So it starts with that kindergarten readiness assessment. And then in grade 3, we're looking for all students to be reading at or above grade level. In grade 5 is where we focus on our MCAP assessments, those state assessments, and we're looking for students to achieve at or above proficiency there. In grade 8, looking at a successful completion of Algebra 1 with a grade C or higher. And then in high school, you see there's really several benchmarks we're looking at, whether it's SAT, ACT, and as far as looking at readiness for post-secondary, for college. We also have, our AP and IB pathways. Pardon me, I accidentally muted. We're also looking at grade 2 Algebra 2 by grade 11 for all of our students with a grade C or higher. So next, and also just to reiterate too, it is a technical and a social process when we look at supporting our students' social, emotional well-being and their academic achievement. Next slide, please. All right, again, we go into a little more detail here on closing our gaps and equitable strategies. The gaps, again, are longstanding. So when we look at, BCPS, we are looking at 2011, even prior, where the gaps have existed. We know we start looking at gaps by student level. We have gaps across all 3 of our levels, elementary, middle, and high. We see chronic absenteeism for our Black African American students, Hispanic Latino students, students of 2 or more races, and students who are coded economically disadvantaged. So those are the gaps that have been persisting. As far as academically, we saw gaps in literacy, mathematics, kindergarten readiness, and chronic absenteeism. So, if we think back to that pathway, a lot of those achievement markers we were looking at, we know there were gaps there. And then there were significant concerns around climate and emotional safety, reported by students prior to and immediately following the pandemic. So we know as a society, the impact the pandemic has had. And of course, we experienced that here in BCPS. And, we knew that students were in need of greater levels of support as they grappled with the outcomes of the pandemic and actually persisting through the pandemic. So what have we done as a result of knowing these situations or these conditions existed? So we made sure that we had a focus on equitable strategies to close the achievement gaps. And this is really some of our newer work in BCPS. And this came in early education, really with a focus on pre-K, expanding the number of seats at the pre-K level. So in FY24, we did offer 2,026 full-day seats. In FY26, we're prioritizing, Tier 1 students. So we're really looking to invest in early education. Evidence-based instruction has been a focus. So looking at new elementary and secondary literacy curriculum, also English language development curriculum, all rooted in the science of reading. Also looking at rigorous curriculum aligned to standards. So ensuring that all of our new curriculum is aligned to MSD standards. Making sure our district assessments, we call them our CBAs, curriculum-based assessments, make sure those are aligned to standards as well. So standards-based instruction and the curriculum was certainly a focus and has been here as of late. Also looking at equitable allocation of resources. So our CSI and ATSI schools We formed school support and improvement teams to support schools that are in higher needs. And then we have a school allocation dashboard that has been newly introduced. Professional development has been another focus, really a back to basic approach, if you will, to really make sure that we are tending to needs of all of our students, all of our teachers rather. So setting this baseline with research for better teaching and skill for teacher resources. Training has occurred in the summer for all staff. It is mandatory and year long as far as the NEO. So we're looking at new educators, starting with them in the summer and also year long in an induction format to make sure that we support our new educators throughout the year. And then our new Principals Academy to make sure our school leaders are prepared to lead in the schoolhouse. And then we have extended learning opportunities. So summer programs focused on literacy and mathematics with a focused outreach on students who are most in need. And then we look at, having students cross that finish line, if you will, coming out of high school. We have regional high school enrichment and credit recovery opportunities. Next slide, please. All right. And with this, I will turn it back over to Mr. Beerbaum.
All right, good afternoon again. We wanted to give a little context around National Board Certification and what it is. And so National Board Certified Teachers are educators who have achieved a voluntary advanced teaching credential that goes beyond the state licensure. This particular process consists of 4 components that engage teachers in deep reflection about their practice and also responsive instruction to all students. The goal of it is to develop, retain, and recognize what National Board calls accomplished teaching, and to ensure that every student is taught by a highly qualified educator. It is a rigorous process, and it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to complete. Really depends on individual preference and the success on their components. Their first initial process is 1 to 3 years, and then there is 2 additional years if they need to retake any of their components. But research has shown that students who have an NBCT in front of them, it's equivalent to having an extra 2 to 3 months of instruction. Next slide, please. So currently in the state of Maryland, there's just under 2,300 National Board Certified teachers. That amounts to 3%. We're slightly below that at 2%. Currently, we have 162 National Board Certified teachers. But in the last few years, that number has grown exponentially, and we will continue to see that number grow exponentially in the years to come, as we have close to 600 teachers that are in the pipeline at the moment. We have just under 25% of our NBCTs are in our MSDE low performing schools. But again, we anticipate that number to grow in the coming years, particularly as we get further into the implementation of the career ladder, for a couple of reasons. One, as when we enter into level 4 of the career ladder, that will include priority given to those that have served at low performing schools. Additionally, the continued increase in salary, which amounts to an additional $7,000 per year on top of the initial $10,000 for achieving certification, that will continue to serve as an incentive for teachers. And then we continue to target low performing schools through personalized information sessions, in-person visits, and collaboration with school leadership to increase our enrollment in those schools. And we also prioritized school-based cohorts for our low-performing schools, and we have that being led by our professional learning facilitators. Next slide, please. Wanted to give a background of our demographic data before we review our NBC-specific data. And currently, we can see that a majority of our student population consists of Black, white, and Hispanic students. If we look at our teacher force, the demographic data shows that a majority of our teachers currently in the system are predominantly white, with the number of Black teachers in the system representing 17% of the population. Next slide, please. On this slide, we are comparing our BCPS data versus the state of Maryland, and what the demographics look like for those that are MBCTs at the moment. When we look specifically at the demographic data of our National Board Certified Teachers, we see that the number of National Board Certified Teachers is also predominantly white, which is similar to the data shown on the right in the state of Maryland. With that said, we've seen growth and will continue to see the growth in the number of NBC teachers of color, particularly as we continue to use various methods to recruit teachers, which includes using school demographic data to identify demographically diverse staff and target our supports to those schools. We'll continue to utilize in-person information sessions to those schools, collaborate with school leaders in the building, and offer additional support such as our affinity groups and cohorts that are led by our professional learning facilitators, specifically for our folks of color. We remain committed to increasing the number of NBC teachers of color by seeking to collaborate with not just our professional learning facilitators, but also members of our culture and climate team to identify potential barriers and identify ways to mitigate those barriers. Next slide, please. When we look at our candidates, and these are people that have not yet certified but are currently in the process of seeking certification, we can see that some of the efforts that we previously described are already helping to increase the diversity among our candidates, among our teachers. As we can see that our number of Black or African American teachers will increase to 11%. And again, we will continue to see that trend move in the right direction as we continue to offer those supports. And with that, next slide, please. I will take any questions you have, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear what we have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members? Okay, I do have one question for you. On one of your slides, it mentioned that with the National Board Certified Teachers, students can receive, and I think it was an additional 2 to 3 months worth of instruction.
Correct.
So you talked about the process being a roughly 3 to 5 year commitment. Are there any strategies that's being taught through the National Board Certification process that can be pulled out and used immediately to help our students in their instruction without, having to go through that full 3 to 5?
Outside of National Board Certification, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yes. Are there best practices that are being learned there that can be, easily translated into, everyday teaching?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that question. So a lot of the professional development that we offer is rooted in very similar concepts, because when you go through the 4 stages or the 4 components of National Board Certification, one is a content exam, so that would be component 1, but the other 2 are reflective practices. So they focus on differentiation in instruction, teaching practice and learning environment, and then just being an effective and reflective practitioner, which requires data analysis. And we've embedded those concepts in our professional development to all teachers across the board, not just National Board. But this particular program really hones in on those ideas as part of their process. But that is something that we've rooted a lot of and anchored our professional development in.
Okay, thank you. Ms.
welcome.
Delusky, I believe you had a question?
Thank you. Two quick questions. One, is there any cost to teachers who are going through the process for National Board Certification? And then 2, in terms of workload, obviously it is an additional layer of work for teachers? And are there things that are put in place to entice them to still have interest in doing it, to reduce those workload demands? Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for the question. So the first question was related to cost, and there are two ways that they can pursue it. They can pursue it on their own if they choose, which would require it's just under $2,000 that they would be paying out of pocket. However, we offer what's called a NBC fee incentive program. And so we host information sessions starting in January all the way up until June, with information sessions on how to be a part of our fee incentive program. That includes the in-person visits that we talked about, and some of the asynchronous videos that we post as well. So if they enroll in our fee incentive program and they're approved, then we, along with MSDE, cover the cost for those candidates. And MSDE will cover 2/3 of that, and then we cover 1/3 of that cost. The only thing that's out of pocket for those candidates is a one-time, well, each year that they're completing a component, there's a $75 registration fee, and that's not covered under the fee incentive program. So as long as they're going through the fee incentive program, a majority of a significant amount of the cost is covered for them. The second question you asked was about workload and how to offset that. And that's a great question, because that is clearly a barrier for some of our teachers. We offer bi-weekly support sessions for our candidates, and those are led by our professional learning facilitators. But on top of that, we have a multi-tiered support system, which includes our PLFs, or our professional learning facilitators, where they can get various amounts of support, which include enrolling in our internal cohorts that we've developed. They can have one-to-one interactions with a facilitator. They get support from my team. And then we have in-person sessions where we go over the process, but then we also provide structured work time for them, so that they can get the support of a PLF as they're working on their individual components. So there's a lot of layers to the support that we provide to them, so that we can try to make it as easy as possible.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional questions? Okay. Mr. Birnbaum, thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is defining equity and new equity lens questions. And for that, I call on Dr. Handy.
Thank you, Mr. Young. So what I want us to go through together over these next few minutes is just some level setting, if you will. And if I look at, the equity committee as composed, and I look at my role as a co-liaison to the committee, just want to make sure we have clarity around what I consider to be some key definitions. And I'm sorry, let me pause just a minute, Mr. Young. Is it okay if I excuse Mr. Beerbaum from the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Beerbaum, thank you so much for your presentation this evening. You are excused. We'll continue with our current topic then. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So I do want us to look at some key definitions that I think will guide our work. Again, as equity committee members, as a co-liaison to the committee, I think this will help give us some clarity, and also for those who are observing the work of the committee. So 3 key definitions, one being educational equity, the second equity, and then the third equity lens. So I want to start us with educational equity as defined in the Code of Maryland Regulation, Chapter 6 is titled Educational Equity. And according to this definition, educational equity means that every student has access to the opportunities, resources and educational rigor they need throughout their educational career to maximize academic success and social emotional well-being, and to view each student's individual characteristics as valuable. So when I look at this definition, it certainly speaks about what we expect for all students, the type of education we want to provide for all of our students. And then it gets into the idea that we know that each student's going to show up with their individual characteristics. And it's our job as educators, as adults working with students, board members in their governance role, really everyone in our education community, our BCPS community, to view the individual characteristics of each student as valuable and as contributing really towards their academic success and their social emotional well-being. Next slide, please. All right, so here we started at that state level from COMAR. Now I want to take a look at what we have here locally. So this is your policy as board members, policy 0100, equity. The policy you all put forth, and it's a policy that, you know, as a staff member in BCPS, I adhere to as well. It's how I do my work. My work must align with the policy. As a board, as a staff member, it's really a pledge that I uphold these policies. So starting with educational equity, the definition that is in policy 0100 is exactly the same definition from COMAR. So what I read previously is the same definition you'll find in policy 0100. When it comes to equity, the definition in the policy is equity is providing each student with what is necessary to achieve high academic outcomes. So that's some of the same language you saw in educational equity. This one's a little more streamlined. So sometimes you'll hear folks say that equity is providing each person, each student in this case, with what they need. And here we're talking about what they need to achieve high academic outcomes, which is our expectation for all the students that we serve. And then the third definition that you'll find in policy 0100, specific to this discussion, is the equity lens. That's defined as evaluating decisions, programs, practices, and procedures for its impact on all students, but with a focused analysis on impact of historically marginalized groups. So what comes up for me as I read these definitions, it's reiterated again that we do have intentions for all of our students. And then it starts to break down the idea of decisions, programs, practices, procedures. So I think about the various roles, again, whether it's a board member, whether it's a staff member, anyone within our BCPS community who is here to serve students, there will be decisions made, programs put forth, practices we engage in on a regular basis, procedures that we've actually codified. And we're saying that when we put these things in place, we're going to apply an equity lens in our review of these decisions, programs, practices, and procedures. When we create new ones, we will apply an equity lens. This is also the first time we started to get into this idea of historically marginalized groups. And to me, that calls on us to know something about our history. So we've talked earlier in our meeting about, what was happening back in 2011 or even before then. What does our history tell us about students that we've served well and those that we have not served as well? So the equity lens really requires us to take a look at the history of how we've served students and how that applies to what we're doing in the present day. And then, of course, what we'll be doing as we move forward. Next slide, please. And then here we have, back really to a state level, we have a resource from the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, or MABE. This is the equity lens. And this is actually the revised version of the equity lens, or what we refer to as the equity lens questions. I'm not sure exactly when the revision came out. I want to say it was in October 2025. And these are reminiscent of the 5 questions that were in place before, but it has been some edits made. And you'll see on the document, it does say these are key questions your school board may wish to consider when considering or implementing educational equity. I would say, even though it's designed by the Maryland Association of Boards of Ed, it looks like the intended audience is school boards and school board members. I would say as a staff member, I find these to be extremely useful as well, whether it was a previous iteration of these questions or this current iteration. And at this time, I want to give you some time as committee members to review these questions and see what comes up for you as you review these questions. And I'm going to read them just so if we have anyone who's perhaps listening and not able to see the slides, or just anyone that could benefit from my reading of the questions, I do want to go through and read these questions. So as I do that, please read them to yourselves, reflect upon them, and then once I'm done here, I would like to hear any reactions you have, anything that's resonating with you in these questions. And for those that are familiar, and I know you all are familiar with the previous set of questions, maybe even how these questions may compare to the previous questions, and how they may inform your practice going forward. So first question is, what is our universal goal? And which student groups are furthest from achieving it? What is needed to help them make progress and reach the goal? Question number 2, how does this policy or decision help close gaps and move all students towards success? What historical or current inequities exist that this action is designed to address? What evidence do we have? Question number 3, how are we co-designing this with those most impacted to ensure solutions reflect their insights and priorities? How have we meaningfully included students, families, and educators in shaping this action? Question number 4, what resource shifts, partnerships, policies, or other actions would remove obstacles? For example, political, financial, programmatic, or systemic, to accelerate equitable outcomes? And the 5th and final question, how will we monitor, evaluate, and adapt this effort to ensure progress towards equity and share accountability for results? What data is being used to inform this process? So having reviewed the definitions of educational equity, equity lens, having reviewed these questions, again, I'm curious, what's coming up for you? What's resonating? Are there questions you have after seeing these questions? Are there some discussion that needs to occur for you? And again, how do these questions impact your practice as board members and as members of this equity committee? So I'll pause at this point. Mr. Young, I'll turn it back over to you to see if we have any discussion and input from committee members.
Thank you, Dr. Handy.
You're welcome.
And so after hearing those 5 questions from Dr. Handy about the equity lens, are there any questions about them or discussions that we want to have towards those questions?
This is Ms. Pumphrey. I apologize. I don't see my raise hand feature, but I just have a comment.
Please proceed, Ms. Pumphrey.
Thank you. You mentioned comparing this to the previous equity lens, which I don't have in front of me, but what immediately stuck out to me is that I feel like this updated version is more targeted to specific action. I feel like the prior equity lens was a little bit more, a little less active. For example, when I think about it in the policy perspective, and we now have that equity lens in our policy, what's brought forward to us in policy, it speaks more to seeing how the policy may affect certain groups. And this is forcing us, which as it should, to actually go in and look at gaps and how we can change them. I just immediately saw that stick out to me when looking at this updated version.
Ms. Pumphrey, thank you for your comments, and I apologize. I don't have the previous set as a comparison, so you had to ask. Of course, I can't even go back necessarily and look, item for item, but I agree with you. I'm looking at some notes I made, and I even highlighted the help close gaps, and I strongly agree with what you stated around the actionable nature of these questions, and again, I don't necessarily recall whether closing gaps was even the language in the previous iteration of questions or the previous set, but I do agree. I think this adds some clarity and some focus around that. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Ms. Pumphrey. Are there any other questions or comments about the equity lens? Okay. Is that your last slide, Dr. Handy?
Yes, Mr. Young, it is my last slide. If I could add an additional comment.
Okay. Yeah, please. Anything you want to follow up and or wrap up with?
Yep. Thank you, sir. So one thing I want to point out, even though I find these questions to be very actionable, very focused, we notice we talk about number one is setting the goal and then identifying student groups that are furthest from the goal. And I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding about, equity only applying to a particular student group or a particular identity marker even. The idea is that we do make data-driven decisions, and we look to identify, when we aggregate students, we look to identify student groups that are not meeting with success. So again, when you hear the language on the definitions around what we're trying to do for all students, that does apply when we're applying an equity lens as well. So we want all of our students to achieve at high levels, and we know that we have data showing us that particular student groups or individual students are not meeting with success, then the equity lens and equity focus says we must direct resources, attention towards helping those students meet success as well. So I just want to reiterate what I consider really to be the inclusive nature of applying an equity lens in our work. So thank you.
Thank you. I will throw, my 2 cents in. Particularly when you look at like question 5 that talks about monitor, evaluate, and adapt, and asking, what data is being used to inform the process. So I think that is extremely important, to make those data-driven decisions, to see what is working, what isn't, and move from there. So thank you very much, Dr. Handy.
You're welcome.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is purpose and measures of effectiveness of the Equity Committee. So I will be presenting that one in the absence of Ms. Frimpong. We were given the task to review what we have placed for our purpose and measures of effectiveness. I will quickly thank you, Ms. Seabolt. She's displaying on the screen what was submitted via this committee early on. So for the Equity Committee, the purpose was in support of the goals of Board Policy 0100, equity. The board has established a standing committee on educational equity to implement this policy and to report quarterly to the board. The Educational Equity Committee will assist the superintendent in development of strategies to ensure that equitable educational opportunities are being provided to all students who attend Baltimore County Public Schools. And they're listed are 5 measures that were used to define what the effectiveness of this committee is and was. Are there any questions, discussions? Do we feel that those measures are still applicable or that we need to update them?
This is Ms. Pumphrey again.
Yes, Ms. Pumphrey.
One thing that I see is the very last bullet says in fiscal year 2025, and I do understand the purpose of listing the year there is because we would be beginning those reviews. However, I believe that what was requested of each committee was to come up with measures of effectiveness that aren't time oriented, so that it can be something that in general would always apply. So I'm not sure how we could change that to meet that goal.
So we could just take off the first part and, the in FY 2025 begin and make it conduct annual reviews of equity data metrics report.
Yes, I think that works. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Seabolt. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. With that, then we will resubmit these to the full board at our next meeting. So the last item on the agenda is announcements. The next Equity Committee meeting with the Equity Council is scheduled for Thursday, November 20th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. The next Equity Committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 22nd, 2026 at 4 p.m. Is there any further business? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a
Good
good
night.
evening.